There's a mystery in New Jersey. A new mom attacked in her own home in the middle of the day. A killer on the loose. An investigation underway. And questions about who would kill Brooke Hanlon and why. Welcome to Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Homicide investigators in a small town in New Jersey have a mystery on their hands, a mystery that is as tragic as it is confusing. And the investigation has been underway now for nearly a month and involves a relatively new mother who should be spending the summer with her baby and her husband. Instead, a 35-year-old woman's family is grieving. They are planning a funeral, and a baby is left to grow up without her mother. This mystery began on June 6th in Chester Township, New Jersey. That's in Morris County, about an hour's drive outside of New York City. A man called 911 for help because Brooke Hanlon was in her home and she was in bad shape. Here's dispatch audio from that call.
Live 911, you got a guy screaming, needs everyone help. It's Tiresville Road. I'll be responding as well.
Yeah, he's saying she's bleeding all over. He's going to start CPR.
Can I put 863?
63.
You send a call for the tree down. I'm going to take a look.
Yeah, 47 cars. We're starting CPR. 47 cars. They're going to be upstairs on the second floor.
How far? Nick, we're right behind you. We just came down Tiresville. 44 on scene.
Now, the house where Brooke Hanlon lived with her baby and her husband is on Pottersville Road. The house sits off the road, and if you look at it on Google Maps, you'll find that there aren't many homes surrounding the house where Brooke Hanlon and her family lived. There are wooded areas on one side and a yard that's fenced on the other. Now, this really makes you wonder, did the person who killed Brooke Hanlon know exactly where they were going and who they were targeting? Now, there's another piece of this puzzle. This call reporting that Brooke Hanlon needed help and there was blood everywhere came in at 4:30 on a Saturday afternoon. That's typically about the time that a mother of a baby would be getting ready for dinner, maybe, or maybe the baby would be just getting up for a nap, depending on the child's schedule. These are the little things that come to mind when I look at this case. Brooke Hanlon worked as a psychotherapist in New Jersey, according to her LinkedIn page. She describes herself as highly motivated, responsible, and compassionate, an individual with an LPC New Jersey license. She has diverse experiences in various settings working with children, adolescents, and families in need of counseling, therapeutic assistance, resources, and other support. Now, this happened in Chester Township, but the prosecutor's office is leading the investigation, and so far, there's been a really tight lid on this case. The prosecutor's office didn't post about the murder investigation until June 13th. That was a week later. In a Facebook post, the office's spokesperson wrote, "In the late afternoon of June 6th, EMS and Chester Township police officers responded to a 911 call at the residence on Pottersville Road. A 35-year-old resident was found dead in the home. An examination by the Morris County Medical Examiner's Office determined the cause of death to be multiple sharp force injuries and the manner of death as homicide. This remains an active and ongoing investigation by the Morris County Prosecutor's Office, Chester Township Police Department, and Morris County Sheriff's Office, CSI. No further information can be released at this time in order to protect the integrity of the investigation." So that was a pretty standard response. They really don't release a lot of information with active investigations. Brooke Hanlon's name only became public over the last couple of days, and I thought that was pretty curious. All right, so to help us really dig into this case, I want to bring in Jarrett Ferrantino. He's a former prosecutor. He's also an author of a great book available on Amazon. We'll talk about that in just a minute. It's called Mothers, Murders, and Motivation, A Journey Through the Mind and Heart of a Prosecutor. So Jarrett, thanks so much for coming back on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, always love talking to you. What are your thoughts as a former prosecutor on this case? From what we know, they're being very tight-lipped about this, but what are your thoughts?
Well, let's talk first about how tight-lipped they're being about it. I
Yes.
think that's a strategic move. Obviously, the investigators know a heck of a lot more than they're releasing. When they're conducting interviews and continuing to do their investigation, it's imperative that information that would only be known to the killer, himself or herself, remain out of the public sphere, so that can be used to be gleaned in the interviews or to put forth in an interview, like the power of suggestion, get information from individuals that only certain people would have the information that's not released publicly. So oftentimes investigators hold information close to the vest and use that tactically in getting information from a suspect or witnesses or people with information that helps build credibility. How many times have we seen it? We have individuals who provide information that they've learned online or in the media when they really factually have no connection to a case. That is simplified by holding on to that kind of information.
What confounds me is the timeline here a little bit. We have this happening on June 6th, Saturday, June 6th, which was a Saturday. That's when the 911 call was placed. Her name, they didn't release her name until this past weekend. So that's many weeks that passed, 3 weeks that passed until they publicly revealed her name. What could be the strategy there? Because we know, obviously, that the killer knows who she is. There could be a number of reasons, but as a prosecutor, why would you withhold that information for so long, especially when they announced that they had this investigation going back on, the 13th, a week after the homicide?
Yeah, that fact was confounding. I've never been part of a case, nor am I familiar with a case where a victim's identity in what appears to be, this homicide occurred in her home. Whether who did it is another question, but it occurred in her home, in her neighborhood, someone who was known. Her death was widely reported. Why she would not have been named in the initial hours of this investigation or the ensuing days is beyond me. The other thing, not to be so down on the media, when you release that information, someone out there may have knowledge that something between Brooke and another individual, or something about her marriage, something about her financial situation that would help investigators. So in my opinion, not releasing that name could be detrimental to a case.
That's what I'm thinking. Somebody could know something, and it's the prosecutor's office is leading up this case. When I call the police department and I try to get information, they say, no, you got to call the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor's office is in charge of this case. And I get that, they are looking at potential charges here. This is a homicide investigation. But typically the cops, don't the cops typically handle the investigation in consultation with the prosecutor's office? And they're telling me, no, you want to request that, you got to call the prosecutor's office. They're in charge.
Well, I've seen that done both ways. In my experience in Pennsylvania and New Jersey is very much the same. The prosecutor's offices have their own investigators that work in tandem with local police departments. So oftentimes our office, as the prosecutors, would be the coordinators of an investigation, working directly with the state police, even sometimes a federal agency, because here's the way you look at it, and I've always looked at it this way. A case can result in an arrest quickly, but it doesn't end there. You have to investigate a case and build your prosecution from the beginning. It ends with, hopefully, a conviction and justice being served. So it's important that the prosecutors on homicides are involved early and oftentimes coordinating an investigation. The other thing we used to do for smaller police departments, absolutely we'd be in the driver's seat. And when we were working with larger police departments or the Pennsylvania State Police, for example, it was more of a give and take. But any kind of inquiry from individuals like yourself or members of the local media would come through the prosecutor's office. So we're speaking in one voice.
Yeah. Well, that certainly makes sense. And this
could be a smaller kind of bedroom community police department that doesn't handle a lot of homicides. One thing that I find interesting about this, Jarrett, you listened to the dispatch audio just like I did, and they say there's this guy on Pottersville Road. He says he needs help. There's blood everywhere. He's going to do CPR. It's 4:30 on a Saturday. I'm thinking to myself, I'm just thinking, I don't know what work schedules are like in this home, in the Hanlon home on Pottersville Road, but it's a Saturday afternoon. This is a couple with a young baby. Was husband at work? Did husband come home and find his wife? Was he out golfing? Was he out with the guys? I have no idea. But 4:30 in the afternoon on a Saturday, this woman is discovered stabbed to death, apparently on the second floor of the home. What comes to mind as far as you're concerned with listening to that dispatch audio?
Well, I would be interested. I would have to know what is going on in the lives of Brooke and her husband and anybody else in her life. You have to do this victimology, this reverse engineering, for example. You look at Brooke, hopefully they can identify exactly when this had occurred. That's important. Where it occurred, which room in the house did it occur? Did it occur actually in the house, which is more likely than not? That's your crime scene. You do everything you have to do to preserve the evidence, photographs, forensic testing, everything. The next thing you do is you reverse engineer their lives. What was going on in their lives? What was their marital situation? What was their financial situation? Did they have anything going on? Was anybody angry with them? How do you do that? Nowadays, you do that through examining cell phone records, emails, the cloud where information is backed up, geospatial technology, their door cameras, talk to their neighbors, talk to their friends. Those are the kind of things that would likely be happening now and have been going on since the beginning.
And one thing that's very interesting to me is the location of this home. This home is not just it's not like in suburbia. It is in suburbia, but it is not, if you will, in a subdivision. It's basically on a road, on a bend, and it doesn't appear that there are any other homes around. I mean, if you're going to go to this house, I would think that you would need to know where you are going. I mean, this is not just like, oh, I happened upon this house. It's possible it's the target of a home invasion, but let's just put this up on the screen for just a moment. I want to show this to you. So here it is, Jarrett. I mean, this is our house, and there aren't any other houses that appear to be nearby. If you look at this Google map, you've got a yard there. The Pottersville Road goes down the road. This doesn't seem to be some well-traveled, highly traveled road. So in order to get to this location, you would have to know where you were going. You would go there with a purpose.
Well, that's one school of thought. Certainly it appears to be a destination type target situation where you would have knowledge. It's not something you would randomly happen upon. The other school of thought would be it's so isolated from other neighbors that it's a residence that could be targeted easily because maybe somebody's not going to hear someone yelling. Maybe there's not going to be witnesses nearby to make certain observations. Now that's pure speculation, but there are two schools of thought when you look at a location like that. But I've prosecuted enough cases like this. The timing is significant. It's Saturday afternoon. What's going on at 4:30 on Saturday afternoon? And if you have children, there's either a birthday party or something in the morning. You're pivoting into whatever's going on for the evening. In most cases, you're home on Saturday afternoon. It's literally the only time, at least in our house, where everybody's around, right? Or Sunday afternoon. So
I'm thinking the baby would be waking up from a nap around that time.
Exactly. And that's not the time or place for random type targeting. And again, now, anecdotally, I've not seen a property or a residence targeted at that time of day. Typically, you're going to see a home like that targeted at night very early. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but so little has been released about this. You have to call upon what you commonly see in these types of cases. And by the way, somebody called 911. There was enough time to think I'm performing CPR, which would suggest maybe Brooke was still alive or struggling to stay alive when that call was made. If somebody happened upon her and she was clearly dead, clearly sustained these multiple stab wounds, and she had been dead for some time, you would not be necessarily talking about CPR. So this is someone who either happened upon her relatively quickly after she was killed or attacked, or somebody who was likely involved. And this was an act of rage. Again, which here's what we know. She was stabbed in her chest, and then somebody called and there was blood everywhere and they were talking about CPR. That talks about something that happened in the moments around that attack.
The timing is significant, and what's also curious to me is the prosecutor's office. There's a baby involved here, so of course, that raises the sensitivity level. But they're not even commenting on the baby at all. I mean, I said, "Is the baby okay? Is the baby safe?" And they won't comment. And I understand that to a degree. So they're investigating one homicide, so we at least know the baby was not harmed. Thank God. But that's like a grisly scene. Can you imagine? There's a baby, we assume, in the home with the baby's mother, and mom is stabbed to death. And so somebody's calling 911 to save her. I mean, that's a horrific scene to walk into.
And sadly, I've seen it. I've seen cases like that. I had a case where the children were essentially in between mom and dad when dad killed mom with a gun. If this is truly a domestic situation and the rage is targeted at someone's partner, oftentimes children, if they don't become victims themselves, are witnesses. Now, I know their child is very young, but I would imagine we would absolutely know at this point if the child was harmed or if this was a double homicide situation. It does not appear.
Yeah, we would totally know that. It's just bizarre to me that they won't even say, like, the baby is safe with family or something to that effect. One thing, you talked about victimology earlier. Brooke is a therapist. She was a therapist. And, everything online that discusses her practice talks about how she works with families, adolescents. I'm assuming that they're going to look into that avenue too. Did she have some clients? Did she have any clients who had a beef with her for some reason, or I don't know, an infatuation with her? There could be any number of things, but that is one thing they have to rule out.
I think clearly, again, part of that victimology is, who was Brooke? Who was she as a wife? Who was she as a mother? Who was she as a psychotherapist? And yes, let's talk about that. The folks that are seeing Brooke in a clinical setting are clearly having the type of issues that they're in talk therapy, seeking therapy. It would require an examination of her patient records to look to, was there anyone that was threatening her? Had she expressed fear or concern with regard to any patient? Was there a break in care with regard to a patient very recently or in the last several months that would result in someone wishing ill will upon Brooke? Now, again, these are things if this was truly a whodunit. If this is clearly a domestic situation and there is physical evidence on scene that supports this was a domestic situation that went badly, clearly, you would not necessarily be going that deep into the weeds. But if it is truly a whodunit and you're looking at, was there a third party random burglar, random assaulter, somebody from outside the family, then yes, you're going to have to be going through those contacts in her records.
I want to know about the electronics in the home, the cell phones. Is there like an Alexa that picks up audio? Are there security cameras outside the home, inside the home, since you're out kind of in the middle of nowhere, or at least in a, a more desolate area. It's not totally desolate, but if you live out there, you would think you might have some cameras around the house, and whether or not those picked up anything.
Well, that's the kind of stuff that today's day and age are so powerful and significant in investigations. The other thing is, did she have an Apple Watch? Is her heart rate there? Can we identify when her heart rate got to a level where she was under attack and ultimately passed away? If somebody is said to say, oh, we weren't fighting, nothing was going on that day, things were calm, yet you have all these acceleration, decelerations in her heart rate, or text messages support that there was some kind of ongoing dispute. Those are the kind of things you use to counter what someone may be saying, and use in your presentation ultimately in a prosecution down the road. So I also would imagine, because that road is somewhat isolated, you would canvass neighbors up and down that road to see if they have cameras for vehicles that may have passed. Also significant. These are the kind of things that will help. Again, if this was a third party introduced from the outside, those things even become more significant. And we talk about even having to eliminate suspects. Again, it all depends on what's known to the investigators right now. Are they focused on a particular individual that was home with her, or the concept of a third party?
Yeah, I think the electronics will tell a lot of the story here. I think those will be very important. And it takes some time to get that information back and to analyze it. So we'll see what happens with that. Jarrett, talk to me a little bit about your book. Tell us about the book.
Well, sadly, the book talks about a very similar case, a domestic case where a mom was killed in her home. But the book also talks about moms that I've had the honor of fighting for in my life. And it talks about my mom, who raised myself and my three brothers after the loss of our dad at a very early age. So the book celebrates moms as powerful, powerful forces in cases that I fought for them where their children were killed, moms that were killed in an instance, and a mom that was held accountable for failing to protect her child. So, I'm looking at this case. I see another tragic loss of a mom. We don't know all the details, but we do know that a child is left motherless here. A family has lost Brooke. Sadly, I've seen a lot of this over the course of my career, and I wrote about it. And I hope that the book brings strength to people that find themselves in this type of situation, but at the same time shows that there's hope in our criminal justice system.
Yeah, I think it's worth checking out, everybody. It's available on Amazon. And Jarrett, thank you so much for coming on and offering your time to talk about the Brooke Hanlon case. It's devastating. It's so sad. And hopefully for her family and friends, they get some answers very soon. Thank you.
Anyone with information about Brooke Hanlon's death is asked to call the Morris County Prosecutor's Office. That number is 973-285-2900. And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.